Welcome to Learn to Live Stress-Free. This is Christine Wright with Dr. Robert Wright Jr. of www.stressfreenow.info. Today, we will be speaking with world-renowned psychic Carol Ann Liaros on her work with Project Blind Awareness. Carol Ann Liaros is a professional psychic who trains others in the field of parapsychology. For 8 of her 40 years in this field, Miss Liaros was tested by some of the world's leading parapsychologists. Carol Ann's accuracy of predicting the future was tested at a rate of 93 to 97% accurate. Miss Liaros is a gifted and intuitive inner resource instructor and author. She works with churches, corporations, and groups as a consultant and instructor in the areas of creativity, intuition development, grant funding, personal placement, and trend detection forecasting. Carol Ann has appeared in the movie Inner Spaces, narrated by Edgar Mitchell, the 6th astronaut to walk on the moon. She has been a senior trainer for the ARE, Edgar Cayce Center in Virginia Beach, for almost 30 years. Various aspects of Carol Ann Liaros' work are included in over 20 books, including Superlearning by Sheila Ostrander and Lynn Schroeder, plus Fire in the Soul, A New Psychology of Spiritual Optimism by Dr. Joan Borisenko. Miss Liaros is the author of Intuition Made Easy, and she has recorded an Intuition Technique series on cassette tapes. She is also co-author of Edgar Cayce on Auras and Colors, written with Kevin Tedeschi, CEO of the ARE, Association of Research and Enlightenment. Carol Ann has designed innovative, creative techniques known as the Liaros method that has successfully helped others to use their own intuition and practical ways. Carol Ann is also a luminary on our site, stressfreenow.info, and she is a very dear friend and mentor to Bob and myself. Carol Ann, welcome.
It is my pleasure, Christine. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, Carol Ann, it's so good to hear your voice, and welcome to our audience. Carol Ann, what led you to the work that you are currently doing?
Well, my work with Project Blind Awareness started through a whole series of, I put this word in quotes, coincidences, because I don't believe in coincidences, with Project Blind Awareness. I was teaching a class in Batavia, New York, just a regular 6-week, series, how to see auras, how to do psychometry, how to do remote viewing, all that. And it was the evening of how to see auras, and there was one man in the group who did exceptionally well. Most people see it as haze or a glow, etc. And he saw color, and he was able to pick out physical problems in the person's body through their aura. And there were about 40 people in the workshop. And as I was packing up to leave to go back to Buffalo, New York, I was thinking, he's exceptionally good. So this woman came up to me, and she said, "Did you see how well my husband did?" I said, "Yes, he's exceptionally good." It was exciting to see that. And she said, "But you don't know the best part. My husband is totally blind. He doesn't have any light perception." And I was stunned, because I thought, how did he do that? So she brought her husband up, and apparently she had dragged him to this course because he didn't want to come, but she didn't want to come alone. And I asked him, I said, how old are you? He said he was 41. How long have you been blind? Since he was 14. And I said, well, how did you do what the others did with their eyes? How did you see the aura? And he stopped and he thought for a moment. He said, it's like I saw through the middle of my forehead. Well, there is a belief in this whole psychic field that there is the third eye in the middle of the forehead. And when that is open, people can see psychically. Yet this man had never read anything about that. He didn't appear to really believe in psychic things. And so I said, well, that was interesting. You did very well, and, so on. You were so accurate. And I drove back to Buffalo, New York, thinking, gee, that's interesting. I wonder if other blind people can do that. I've never read anything about it. And I promptly forgot about it. But when the universe wants you to do something, it makes sure you wake up. And about a year later, I was doing a class in Niagara Falls, New York, and I also, the same night, seeing the auras. And again, this man saw the auras very extensively, could see that this man had had a heart attack that was up against my screen, and so on and so forth. And he came up to me afterwards, and not only was he blind, he didn't have any eyes. They had been removed when he was, I believe, 3 months old from cancer. And I asked him, well, how did you do? Same thing. He said, it's like I saw it from the middle of my forehead. Well, he was a blind physicist, and he was very interested in the fact that he could see this aura and be accurate, and so did the man in Batavia. So he and I got together and set up a 6-week pilot study, and he gathered blind people because he belonged to all kinds of blind organizations. And so we started 6 weeks, and we would do a baseline beforehand. For example, I taught them relaxation and concentration, meditation, but we did a baseline beforehand where they scanned laminated, bright-colored sheets of the primary colors, red, green, blue, etc. And they did mere chants alone. But then after going through relaxation, concentration, meditation, further instructions, it became very obvious that their scores increased. In fact, I had volunteers working one-on-one, 20 blind people, 20 volunteers, and I had put together a advisory board that had a physiological psychologist on it and a engineer and 2 medical doctors and so on. And so we did the statistics. They kept, the scores on it, and Douglas Dean, Dr. Douglas Dean did the statistics on it, showing that it was, can't say the word, statistically high in the change after they went through the training. So I thought, well, that's very interesting. I wonder if other blind people can do this, and I wonder if someone has done this, and I just hadn't heard about it with blind people. And then I began getting phone calls from the blind people. We were fascinated. Would you continue to work with us? It was so exciting. I was amazed. And so I said, okay. So we started. Again, I had 1 volunteer for every blind person, and we kept records and so on. And so I started out again with the deep relaxation and concentration and meditation, and had them scan a colored sheet, laminated colored sheet, let's say red. And I'd ask them these 2 questions. What are you feeling, and where are you feeling it? And they would describe that. Then we'd go on to, let's say, green, and the same thing. And then we put 2 colors in front of them, and we'd have them scan that. And from the feeling they were getting in their hand, they would verbalize whether they thought these 2 sheets were the same colors or different. And they did amazingly well. And then from there, what I did, we did black and white and red and green, blue, yellow, all the colors. And after that, then I had my volunteers bring in photographs of people that they knew, black and white photographs, 1 person in the photograph. And I turned them upside down, and we gave several photos to each volunteer, and the volunteer would hand it to the blind person upside down. So even if they had light perception, they wouldn't be able to see what was on the photograph. And they would scan it, and through the difference in the feeling between the different shades of gray and white and black in the photo, they would outline and tell their volunteer whether this was a full figure, whether it was just a bust figure, what it was. And then they were to identify if it was a male or a female, and then any other information they got about it. And a most peculiar thing began to come out of this is, for example, Bob Foley had a photograph, and he said, oh, this is a woman, and she has on a blue dress, and she's got a gold pin on her dress, and she has blue eyes and blonde hair. And the volunteer turned it over, and it was a black and white photograph of a woman, but the volunteer didn't know what color the dress was and so on, so had to find out which volunteer brought that photograph, and then ask them what color dress did she have on, what color eyes, etc. And so things like that began to happen with that 1 simple, I'll call it, technique, and other things. Again, Bob Foley was scanning a photograph upside down, and he said, oh, it's very hot here. And we turned the photo over, and he also said, I think it's a woman, no, it's a man. And he went back and forth. And he said, I think it's a woman, but she has a ball sitting on the top of her head. And we turned the photograph over, and it turned out to be a photograph of Adele Davis, a very famous nutritionist. And she had her hair severely pulled back, and she used to wear this bun on the top of her head. And where he felt the heat, where it was so hot in the photograph, was at her neck area. And the reason Adele Davis got interested in the whole nutritional field was she had a very severely non-functioning, I believe, thyroid. And so that's where Bob was saying it was so hot. So we had very fascinating things like that occurring in the Blind Project. And then we moved on to other things, including what I called at that time, back in the 70s, I called it mind traveling, but it's been renamed remote viewing by others, where we would have the blind person, I would have the blind person pretend to go to their volunteer's home and walk through the living room and describe where the furniture placement was, how many chairs, colors, things hanging on the wall, whatever type of things like that in their imagination. And they did very well with that, except for one of the people was Father Schomer, who was a very skilled violinist. In fact, he had played with the Buffalo Philharmonic. And before he became blind, he had a photographic memory. And one time he was playing golf and got hit in the eye with a golf ball and became blind in that eye. And then through non-connection to that, he got a disease in the other, so he no longer could see. And he was very, very intelligent. And he said, the other things we've been doing, I can accept. I can explain that in broader scientific terms. But this mind-traveling thing, how can you describe a place you've never seen? And yet he had seen his other students there who were blind describing accurately. So finally he said, I give up. I'm not going to try anymore. And so the night he said that, he told his volunteer, well, I feel like I'm walking up a sidewalk that's cluttered with a lot of toys. And he's thinking to himself, as he told us later, well, there wouldn't be toys there. He could tell by the woman's voice, his volunteer's voice. She was an older woman and wouldn't have young children around. And when he went into the address and he saw toys all over the living room and, I don't know, furniture placement, etc., and apparently he did extremely well that night, where the furniture placement was, the color of the couch, and his volunteer laughed and said, yes, there are toys all over the place because my daughter is in the process of getting a divorce and she's moved in with her 2 young children, and there are toys everywhere. So as soon as he stopped trying and just relaxed into it, it worked. And that seems to be true of blind or sighted.
Wow,
so there are many
Carol,
exciting stories like that. In fact, it became so commonplace, we would be surprised when things like that didn't happen.
That is amazing, Carol Ann. So, Carol Ann, let me ask you this question. I know this will be an easy one for you, but other people have had difficulty defining exactly what intuition is and what it is not. I recall many years ago being in Vermont, and an author of a novel on intuition, during the question and answer, I asked her, could you define intuition? And I remember she said, oh, that's a really toughie. And so I was puzzled because she had written a book about intuition. And so I was wondering if you could define intuition for our audience.
Well, the way I define intuition is it's instant knowing. Okay, it's just there. You just know it. While getting psychic impressions is sensory. If you get psychic impressions, you'll see it, you'll hear it, you'll feel it, you'll smell it or taste it, one of those things, while intuition is instant knowing. You don't see anything, you don't hear anything, you don't feel anything. It's just there for you to know. It's a knowingness.
Thank you, Carol Ann. You know, as I listen to you describe your work with the blind, I find it extraordinary, as Bob said, and I'm sure our audience finds it that way too. You mentioned that the person who had resistance was the person who had this photographic memory. So in the time that you did this work, when everyone came to this, how open were they to this? Because I'm assuming this was new and strange to many of them.
Well, as I understand it, Sam Lentine, who is the blind physicist I was talking about, he told people that they were coming to learn relaxation and concentration and meditation and how to tell the difference in colors. And so they were sort of, inclined to have that explanation and come. And many of them, not many, but there might have been several, who came because it was another night out. It was something that sounded interesting, and so on. And so they came originally to the pilot study, and then were excited by what they could do, what happened to them. Not what I could do, not what their neighbor could do, what they found they could do. And so there was an openness. Now, there were a couple that did drop out of the original training because they felt it was against their religion as they defined what intuition or psychic was. It apparently, for them, conflicted with their religious beliefs. Although I don't understand that because, of course, in the Bible it says some will be given the gift of prophecy, some the gift of discernment, healing, etc. And as I understand it, Jesus once said, all of these things I do, you can do too. Of course, I'm paraphrasing. So I was surprised, but that was their belief. But other than that, people were very open because they were doing something they didn't know they could do.
Right. That's very understandable. I know just in my own past, I'm someone who's tended to rely on logic all the time and not use my intuition, whereas my mother, she very easily used her intuition. And I think the first time that I saw you giving a workshop, I saw it in one of the ARE catalogs or brochures, and I said, I have to go and see this. This looks so fantastic, and, the write-up about you looks so great. And when I went to your workshop, you did a meditation to prepare everyone in the room, and, I did it, seemed fine. And then when we started to read people in the room, and what was interesting for me that day, the two people that I read, they both had the same name, and I thought that was interesting. And both the readings were accurate, but the first reading that I did, I was shocked because things just came to me from that meditation. Right. And I was hesitant to tell this woman because I said, I don't know her. I can't say these things. I don't know anything. But I followed your instructions for the process, and when I told this woman these things, they were accurate. I think I was more shocked than she was.
Probably.
Is that an experience that many people have when they work with you? And I mean, this happened immediately. So
yes, it is.
How much is this in our system, and we're not aware of this?
Well, there was an old belief that it's a gift. That if you're psychic, it's a gift. Some people believe that, and it is a gift. But the good news is we all have the gift. We just haven't been shown how to pay attention to it, bring it to the conscious awareness when we need it, and use it in very practical ways in our everyday life. And so people are very excited, and that's what has motivated me. I've been teaching workshops for about 48 years, and that's what motivates me to keep doing it because it's so exciting to see people wake up and honor and respect and use their own psychic intuition abilities.
Well, that's what I love so much about your work, that I don't know if you are considered or if you could be the pragmatic psychic, because you have always instructed, and I say to Bob often, that even when you give a reading with your level of expertise, you tell people to use their own logic and their own intuition and to measure anything you say against their own intelligence and their own intuition.
That's important. That's very important.
And it
was very interesting because then when I gave a lecture, I was asked to give a lecture at the parents of blind children. They said, why don't you have a program for our children? Well, frankly, it never occurred to me. I'd never worked with children in that capacity except my own. And so I got together a group of school teachers who had taken my workshops and so on, and then we formed Junior Project Blind Awareness, and the blind adults came, and it was 5 days long. and some of the blind adults came and sat in on it and were astonished at how quickly and easily they did it when it took them a while to get used to it and to accept it's real and this, that. They just saw these kids jump in and say, oh, red feels, hot to me. I can tell red. And that excitement, no questions about now, is she conning us? Is this scientifically proven? It must be my imagination. She said I would feel something, and I do. Kids don't have that going for them. And so they were so easy to work with and astonishing.
Well, that is wonderful. We really want to thank you so much for being on the show, Carol Ann, and sharing, your body of work and all the wonderful things that you've done throughout your career. Carol Ann, would you tell our audience how they can work with you or learn more about you and what you're doing?
Sure. We send CDs to any blind person who wants them, my series of techniques, the relaxation technique, how to see auras, how to do mind traveling or remote viewing, and we send those free to any blind person who requests them.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Carol Ann. So, audience, you can get more details at www.carolanliaros.com. That's CAROLANNLIAROS, carolanliaros.com, or you can email caliaros@msn.com. That's caliaros@msn.com, or call into the office at 716-876-4414. So you would be able to be in touch with Carol Ann that way. Thank you so much, Carol Ann.
Thank you.
Carol Ann, as I've been listening, you know how much affection and admiration that we have for you. I just would like, before we wrap up with our final question, I'd like you to just briefly share the story you had told us a while back about how throughout your life you've had so many incidents where people try to disprove your abilities, and some people claiming that you're a fraud, and how I was thinking of this one particular story you had told about a TV reporter where the TV station's producer sent out a reporter trying to get proof, and for the nightly news of something that I forget exactly, but I remember you in the story something about a table or something like that. Do you remember that story?
I think I know the one you're referring to. Is that the one where the reporter came to run me out of town?
Yes, that story.
Okay, well, I think it was Channel 7, I'm not sure. Anyway, he called and asked if he could come and, film me for the news, and I said sure. So he came in, and he said, would you be willing to do a reading for me on film while you're being filmed? And I said sure. So he gave me his watch, I believe it was, and I took his watch and I told him some things, and then I said, you're going to be changing jobs. I know you're a reporter, here you are. I said, but you're going to be changing jobs and doing something entirely different. And I said, and you'll be traveling to and from Buffalo, New York to Washington, D.C. You won't go there and live, but you'll be traveling back and forth. And I said, that'll be happening very soon, within the next, I think I said month or so, whatever it was I said. Well, as I'm talking, he's telling the cameraman to shut the camera down, and he's looking at me, and he's stunned, and he's saying, nobody knows that but me, my wife, and the people who offered me this job. He was offered the job of, I believe, director, whatever it was, the head of the NFTA, the Niagara Frontier Transit Association, I guess it was, which was just forming, and no one knew about this except, these three people. And he said, you have to be psychic. He said, I said, well, that's going to go out on the news. He said, oh, no, it's not. He said, I want to tell you something, Ms. Liaros. He said, I came here to make a fool out of you and run you out of town because I believe that all psychics are charlatans. So anyway, he said, but there's no question that you're for real. And so what happened in the future was when he would come and film me for the news, again, he always prompted me on what to say and what not to say so I'd look good. That's the story you wanted?
Yeah. Well, and so what's the end of the story? Did the gentleman actually switch jobs? Did he?
Oh yes, he did. Yeah, he became the head of the NFTA. Left. I think it was Channel 7, but I'm not sure. Yes.
Okay, very good.
What happened?
That's wonderful, Carol Ann. So let me just wrap up by asking you this final question. What final thoughts or key idea would you like our audience to take away from today's broadcast?
Intuition, psychic ability, it's easy, it's fun, and it's practical.
Wonderful. Okay. For Christine Wright, this is Dr. Robert Wright, Jr. of www.stressfreenow.info. I want to thank our audience for listening. Until next time, be safe and be well.